back, everyone. This is the Changelog. We're a member-supported blog, podcast, and weekly email covering what's fresh and what's new in open source. Check out the blog at thechangelog.com, our past shows at 5by5.tv/changelog, and you're listening to episode 123. Jerod and I, we caught up with Chad Whitacre, the founder of Gittip, and we talked to him about what's new this year with Gittip and the directions they're taking. Today's show is sponsored by our friends at Rackspace, CodeShip, and TopTal. We'll tell you a bit more about CodeShip and TopTal later in the show, but our friends at Rackspace, they continue to dedicate themselves to support the open source and developer community, and they're doing it even more so with their developer discount. Now you can go make something awesome on them. People who listen to the show, you're makers. Each day you get up thinking of something new, awesome, and amazing, and you want to put your imagination and your skills to work, and Rackspace would like to give you something special just to say thank you. So sign up today for their developer discount and get $300 in free cloud services on your Rackspace cloud account. This discount applies to new products like their performance cloud servers and cloud queues as well. You're even eligible for early access to new features and products that they roll out, so that's pretty cool. Make something awesome and get started today. Go to developer.rackspace.com/devtrial. And now, on to the show. We're joined today by an awesome friend, previous person that's been on the show before, Chad Whitacre, founder of Gittip. I'm Adam Stakoviak, and we also have the managing editor, Jerod Santo, on the show. So we got three people on the call today, a fun show lineup. It's kind of like it's definitely like a reconvening, right, Chad? Because you were on the show almost to the day this time last year.
Absolutely. And our annual May call, our check-in.
Yes. Yeah. And you got a birthday coming up soon. Not personally, but Gittip.
All right. Yep. Gittip is going to be 2 years old on June 1st.
June 1st. Wow.
A couple weeks here.
Scary, right?
You know, this has been a really big milestone in my mind since I started. I've kind of thought 2 years is the amount of time I've given myself to work on this and see if this is going to go anywhere. So we're coming up on that milestone. So it is scary, maybe. Yeah. Kind of definitely a chance to reflect, on what's happened the past couple of years and where we are.
So when you say that, does that mean there may be no future in Gittip, or are you thinking about quitting it? I mean,
that was the question, right?
Okay, the question. So what's the answer?
Yeah, the answer is full steam ahead. That's the good news. I mean, I kind of said, all right, I'm going to be heads down and I'm going to just go for it, right? And I'm not going to pay attention to, how fast we're growing or, how well we're doing or what's going on with it. I'm going to kind of like stay heads down and just work and plow ahead on it. And then at that 2-year mark, that's when I'll come up for air and say, all right, where are we? Is this thing, is this thing going to work? Is this going anywhere? Do I still love working on it? Do I not love working on it? And make a decision. And, the bottom line is I still love working on it, and we're growing. For how deep we've set the plow, I'm pretty encouraged by our growth. When I compare myself to others, I get discouraged. But when I look at Gittip itself and realize that it's something I still believe in and love doing, then I'm encouraged. So, the short answer is yes, we're moving ahead, full steam ahead on Gittip.
So, Chad, for those of us who weren't around last May, I think that was episode 87, if anyone wants to go back and listen. Can you just give us briefly the Gittip elevator pitch?
Yes. Gittip is a way to give money every week to people and teams you believe in. So the mission of Gittip is actually to enable an economy of gratitude and generosity. And practically what that means, the way we're instantiating that is giving money every week to people you believe in, right? So you're using somebody's open source libraries and you really appreciate the work that they're doing, and you want to show your appreciation and gratitude and you want to support them. Gittip is a way to do that by setting up a weekly recurring donation to them as small as a penny up to $100 a week. And it's a no strings attached gift. That's one of the that's where Gittip is on the scale of crowdfunding from like investment through, Kickstarter. I'm getting a sticker, I'm getting a product. Gittip is on the far end where this is really a gift.
So you don't tell them I'm funding you towards this goal, and as long as you're working on that goal, I'll fund you.
exactly. It's really
Cool.
like a patronage model. It's like, I believe in the work you do and I want you to do more of it. I trust that you're going to take this money and you're going to do awesome stuff with it, So it's really trying to dial in on that. Like, I believe in you. Keep doing awesome stuff, right? So that's what we're doing. And we've been so I guess to recap where we're at, we're coming up on 3,000 active users. And I guess we could check. So it was a year ago, was it?
Yeah.
Let's check our charts real quick.
Almost to the day, yeah.
Okay. So we've got, let's check the charts real quick. So right now we've got 28,000 or 2,887. So we're coming up on 3,000 weekly users. That's people who either give or receive or both on the site. And we moved $13,400. What was it, yesterday? So we're up over $13,000. Let's go back. Let's dial it back a year. So that would be week 50. I'm looking at the gittip.com/about/charts.html. And a year ago, we were at 1,000 users and about $3,000.
Wow.
Yes. So we've grown. It looks like 1,800 users. So, almost 200%. And then, and it looks like $1,000 or $10,000. We've grown $10,000, which would be quickly, 4x, 5x over a year ago. So that's not nothing.
That's huge, man. I mean,
it's
that's
not quite a hockey stick, but like I said, for as deep as we set the plow, I'm pretty encouraged for where we're at.
So I'm looking at these charts here on your /about/charts. You have withdrawals. It looks like the weekly gifts, like you said, is 13,444, and your withdrawals is at 7,860. So is the rest, is that differential just what's being traded inside of Gittip, or not traded, but given?
Escrowed. Yeah, we would say escrowed inside of Gittip. So
Cool.
yeah, Gittip is like this bubble within, or this loop, or this circle within the larger economy, right? So you move money into Gittip, you shuffle it around inside of Gittip, and then you pull it out the other side. Right. So there is an amount of money, which is actually, if you click on the stats link that's at the top of that page, I think we're at like 100K escrowed within Gittip right now, something like that. It's coming up. Yeah, a little over 100K is escrowed in Gittip. Yeah. So, we doubled 3 times last year, every 4 or 5 months. And then looking at these charts, we've kind of slowed the past month or two, but I don't know. It's hard to read these things sometimes. But yeah, the past month or two, it's started to flatten a little bit, and kind of scratching our head a little bit about that. I mean, the way I'm seeing it is that last year, okay, so for the first year, 2012, started in the middle of the year. And the name of the game was, we came out of the gate pretty fast and it was encouraging. And then it was all about transitioning from working on Gittip as a side project to me personally working on it full time. That was 2012. So by the end of 2012, I was working on Gittip full time. So when I talked to you guys last year in May,
You're still in transition.
Yeah, well, I'd pretty much transitioned into Gittip full time, but then the challenge in 2013 was, let's go from just Chad working on it to a team working on it, right? Because Zuckerberg isn't the only one working on Facebook, right? It takes a team to build a product, right? And that's no different for an open product than for anything else or any other company. So that was really the name of the game in 2013 was, let's go from just Chad, I'm not building Gittip. I'm building a team that's building Gittip. Is something that I think Kenneth, wasn't Kenneth on the call last year?
I believe so. Yeah, he was.
I think he brought up that quote I'd put out there that this year I'm not building Gittip. I'm building a team that's building Gittip, and so that's what 2013 was about, and it worked. In January of this year, so January 2014. We had our first annual Gittip company retreat, which I hosted here at my house in Pittsburgh. Outside of Pittsburgh during the polar vortex. So
nice time.
The middle is, yeah, exactly. It's horrible winter. We convinced we had 12 people fly in.
Is that your team? 12 people?
That's the folks that traveled to Pittsburgh, right? So we had a wider team. Because it's like any open source project. You've got a core of people that are really committed, and then you've got this much wider cloud of people that are interested. But it's a long tail, right? It's like so. I think at that point we probably had 60 or 70 people, quote unquote, on the team, which specifically means that they're listed on the team on Gittip. Gittip is funded on Gittip, and we have this Teams feature where when you give money to Gittip, the question is, how do we split that? So we split that 70 ways, and so those 70 people are kind of our wider base, and then out of that 70 people, a dozen of them came to Pittsburgh for our meetup in January. Yeah, so that was kind of that was a milestone for us. That was a success, right? Like, yes, we've got a team. This is real. My wife's like, wait, there's people besides you that are working on Gittip, right? Because I do it all on the internet. She doesn't see it in real life, right? It's like, here's all these people in my house all of a sudden. Chat. Yeah,
they're real. He's not
people
kidding
believe
around.
in this besides Chad. Yeah, people believe in this besides Chad. Yes, exactly.
I've always wondered at what your wife thinks of it because you're really public. Yeah. So last year we kind of made fun of you in some degree for sharing your address and your phone number and the security issues that may come up from that, especially as you get more and more infamous with. And to some degree you're pretty open about your very opinionated ways. And some don't agree with you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There haven't been any disasters as far as that goes this past year. Knock on wood, I guess. Look, there's risks in life, and you can be. I always think of the nickel mine. Wasn't that the Amish shooting? Wasn't that nickel mine, Pennsylvania, or whatever? Right? It's like you can be Amish. You can be living out in the countryside. Totally disconnected, like not sharing, like the least connected in public person, right?
Right.
And still, some nut job's going to bring a gun into your school and shoot all your kids, So it's not like, I don't know. I'm not a statistician by training, but I don't know. I don't think, my gut says it's not safer than not, right? It's like, what are the chances of having, having somebody do you harm? What causes that? What makes you more likely to be hurt than not? This is a point at which I need to pause in the light of a conversation I've especially been having last night. I'm a rich white male. I enjoy lots of privilege, and that's my experience of being open on the internet is absolutely shaped by that, right? If there's this, man, we're getting in deep right off the bat. So one of the things that's happened, one of the unexpected turn of events over the past year is that Gittip is for activists, right? Like we came out of the gate and we're like, Gittip is for open source, and we're going to fund open source on Gittip, and we're doing some of that. But the largest receivers on Gittip, and the top receivers board on Gittip is activists, gender activists, and feminist activists, right? So that was a left turn from my point of view. It's kind of a head scratcher for me. It's like all right, cool. This is one of those cases where it's like, you don't know how your product's going to be used. It's like your users drive your product, right?
Right.
And there's always those surprises in building a product. It's like, oh my gosh, like I never anticipated it would be used this way, but here it is being used this way. And I have anticipated that, I've always wanted for Gittip to grow beyond just open source, right? And it's done that, so that's definitely a success. But what it means is that I'm learning a lot, right? I'm getting lots of feedback because now, and we're actually last night was kind of where it started coming to a head. Like there's been this mounting tension a little bit, because there's all these activists and using Gittip and being funded on it. But there's been a little bit of a disconnect, because I'm not a feminist, I'm not an activist. You know what I mean? It's like that hasn't been my driving concern on Gittip. And so, so I feel like we're just starting to, not just starting, but I'm looking for how to establish a relationship with those users, right? Those people, those users of mine on Gittip. It's like, all right, let's talk. Let's get to know each other. Let's get to know one another. Let's get to know each other. Let me understand where you're coming from and how you're using the platform, what your needs are on it and whatnot. And you can get to know me a little bit because, as you said, I am leading a fairly opinionated online life in this way of doing open things, right? Open companies and open calls. I love that we're live streaming this here, and I'm very comfortable with that. but I'm hearing a lot of different feedback. I'm trying to take that on board, and that's part of the adventure right now.
Yeah, it was interesting. I
Figuring
saw
it out.
some. I think there was some retweeting going of some Gittip. I think even the Gittip account perhaps retweeted some criticism coming your way, and then I was surprised to find that the criticism was coming from one of the top receivers on your homepage.
I love it, right?
Yeah, and I was kind of like, oh, well, that's interesting.
I think it's great. I mean, Shanley was the one I was talking to last night, and yeah, she is one of the top receivers. And right, and she's a very opinionated person in her own right, and has a fairly brusque approach to online conversation. And so, I don't know though. I don't know. It felt, yeah. It's I don't know.
Well, you get into a situation where you can really, like you had said, you started Gittip, and let's maybe rewind a tiny bit to kind of give some foundation to some of the conversation we're having right now, which is, and to my understanding, you've started this to fund open source to some degree, so that's also a reason why it's called Gittip. And some people call it Gittip.
Yeah.
So it stems from
yes.
Git, GitHub, open source movement.
Yeah, definitely to an extent. It started when I first bought the domain. I was like, oh my gosh, we need a tip jar for GitHub. I was sitting in my nice cushy corporate job, totally bored out of my mind, and it was like, oh, I would love to just work on my web framework all day long. This Aspen web framework that I've got. Like, what would I need to do? Like, why? What if there were a tip jar on GitHub, and then I would be freed up to work on open source stuff all day long. So that was the beginning of it, and how I named it. Gittip, exactly. It was how it started. Really quickly, I mean, I think I invented it right around this time, May 11th, and then launched it 3 weeks later, was the 0th payday. And, within those 3 weeks even, it changed from being just a tip jar for GitHub to, what, this is a lot bigger. This could be a lot bigger. I actually almost named it Logstown. Yeah, so Logstown is the name of the Indian village that is now present day Ambridge, where I live. Right, so it's just a local thing here, and so I bought the domains a few years ago, Logstown, Comnet, and org, and had those domains sitting around. So I was like, well, maybe I'll use this. I'll use Logstown. Then my brother-in-law's, I don't know. Funny side story. My brother-in-law was like, "No, man, that makes me think I'm going to the washroom." He always calls it the washroom. It's like, so that makes me think I'm going to the washroom. He's like, "Just stick with Gittip. Gittip is nice because it has like the ITTI. It's like very parallel and everything. It's a nice name." He's not a geek at all. He's a scientist and a musician, but he's not a programmer necessarily, not an open source guy. So he was like, "Just call it Gittip. It's okay." And so I was like, "All right, well, He didn't know anything about GitHub or anything, right? He just thought the name was, cool and memorable or whatever. Yeah, and didn't like Logstown. So right. But my point is that even by the time we launched, I was already thinking that this is going to be bigger than open source. But you're right. That's where it started. So now I like to say that Gittip is related to GitHub in the same way that WikiLeaks is related to Wikipedia.
Yeah.
In other words, they're not really connected at all, but through this historical accident, there's a little bit of brand confusion going on there. But
I think you have some signaling towards that end on the homepage where it's who inspires you, and there's a form, and it's enter a Twitter username.
Yeah,
that's what you start, and GitHub is in the select box, but it's not the first thing.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So it's awesome that that Shanley and Ash and everybody else. Not that they're not all programmers, but more focused on activism. I mean, that's great. That's perfect. That's what we want. I want it to expand beyond open source, and it's done that. So that's a win in my view from the past year. But yeah, we are having some interesting conversations around the whole open company idea and what that means. How you balance. Okay, so my goal with open companies, Gittip, we call it an open company, meaning we share as much as possible, we charge as little as possible, and then we're funded on a pay-what-you-want basis on Gittip itself. And, my driving motivation, open company is not an end in itself for me. Open company is part of this vision of living a life of gratitude and generosity I don't want to hide my stuff. I don't want to work on proprietary things. I want to share the stuff I work on. I want to give the stuff away for free that I work on, just as a matter of principle and how I want to live my life. I want to share what I have, as much as possible. And, so that's where I'm coming from with open companies. But then, what Shanley was feeding back last night, and I've heard from others, is, it's really threatening if you experience a lot of harassment online to think about. I have to sneeze. 1 sec.
The first super loud sneeze on the changelog.
That was an epic sneeze, wasn't it?
I did manage to get my microphone away from my face.
That's awesome. Like a Looney Tunes cartoon.
Sorry. Yeah. There you go. Right. So what I'm hearing is, there's people for whom, the internet is a very much more threatening place than it is for me, right? And you're getting lots of death threats and rape threats and whatnot. And that's really, terrible, right? That's horrible. Like, goodness, sorry. And so, for someone like that, the idea of putting even more online and, exposing yourself even more, obviously comes across as like a WTF, right? Yeah. But that's the conversation we're having, I think.
So we're dancing around this idea of radical transparency. I think that's really what the phrase that was being used, and it's we even said, you're infamous to some degree because not only have you had maybe some abrasions here, but also with journalists that don't really appease to the way you want to operate of being open. So you've kind of had some angst and some abrasions with other people too. So it's not just your user base; it's others too, because you want to be radically transparent about who you are and what you do with your company and what you're doing for the community.
Yeah. I mean, I don't experience it as abrasions, right? I mean, it's an opportunity cost. When I turned down TechCrunch, that was kind of kicked a lot of this off. I got an interview opportunity with TechCrunch, and I had just been starting to experiment with, I think I'd started using the phrase open company at that point, but, hadn't started really pushing open calls and whatnot. And, heard from TechCrunch and, said, all right, I'm going to go for it. Let's do this as an open call. And it's an opportunity cost, right? Because I know that there's a pretty good chance they're going to say no, right? And it's my decision to live with the consequences. They say no, and I don't get an interview in TechCrunch. And so, I'm fine with that, right? I'm fine not getting an interview in TechCrunch. So I don't, I'm not, I don't know. And then more recently, Jason Calacanis reached out to me on email, the angel investor, reached out to me on email and podcaster in his own right, et cetera, entrepreneur. He reached out to me on email and said, would you like to have, I'm interested in having a conversation with you. And I said, all right, great. Let's do it as a hangout. Right. And, I was working with his, another person setting it up and kind of got the ball rolling. And then Jason was like, whoa, not cool. It's like, all right, crap. I just shot myself in the foot again, right? It's an opportunity cost. And it's an opportunity cost that I do feel. But at the end of the day, it's a decision that I'm making, in full knowledge that it's, this is the path I've kind of chosen for myself, kind of painted myself in this corner, but Gittip is still growing well enough and we're still doing well enough that, I haven't felt fundamentally that it's the wrong decision yet. I think it's still the way I'm going, but I am trying to hear these other voices like Shanley's, especially in that side of things. Because it's not an absolute. It's not an end in itself. The purpose, in my mind, what I'm trying to do with open companies is bust open governments and corporations. Like I look at government and I look at corporations. I look at Snowden, right? That's something that happened in the past year, since we talked last. I look at Snowden, I look at the NSA, and WikiLeaks, in their own time. And that's crappy. I don't like that, right? So what am I going to do about it? My activism in this regard, I see that, and my answer is, I'm going to try and live my own life in a way that's, that's not closed and secret, right? I'm going to try and live. I'm going to try and create the system in that, I don't know, in which Snowden is a moot point, right? In which there's nothing to leak in the first place, pretty much. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So which isn't for everybody, and that's fine. But like that's where I'm coming from with this, right? It's not transparency for its own sake, and it can come across kind of cartoonish on the internet because that's the internet, right? Like that's that's memes. It's like boiling stuff down to their caricatured essentials. But obviously it's more sophisticated than that, right? Like I've got people on my team that don't do video calls for one reason or another. Well, we have a daily stand-up every day at noon, that we use Google Hangouts for, and we live stream, right? So I've got this, quite apart from kind of the high-level, abstract level discussion I was having with Shanley last night, like there's real concrete realities in my life and in running my business that are already, that have already called into question the absoluteness of this open ideal and have been not forcing because I want it, right? It's like we're trying to nuance this. I don't want, open company isn't a cartoon, it's a reality, right? I want it to be real, and that means taking into account, the sophistication of it and the nuance of it, and we're already dealing with that. So in the case of the stand-ups and people not wanting to be on video for various reasons, that's fine. So we take their stand-up report in IRC and we read it. We read it on the video, and they watch the video from wherever, right? And so then it's not violating their own, what do I want to say, their own terms of privacy that they've negotiated with the internet, because we each have to negotiate our own relationship with the internet, and that looks different for different people. And, Gittip and open companies are not about railroading people into one single right way, dogmatic way to do it. I'm saying, look, I am privileged, and as much as possible, I'm going to share my privilege with as many people as possible. That's what I'm trying to do here. And, if you're coming at it from a different point of view, I'm going to respect you. I'm not going to violate your confidentiality, your privacy. We do have private channels. Support at gittip.com is a confidential channel. My phone number, that's a confidential channel. Well, except for the NSA, right? But
they listen to their users. You got to give them credit.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but I don't violate confidentiality. And when I do, that's a bug, and I try to apologize for it.
Let's pause the show for just a minute and give a shout out to our sponsor, CodeShip. CodeShip is a hosted continuous deployment service that just works. You can easily set up continuous integration for your application today in just a few steps and automatically deploy your code when all your tests pass. CodeShip has great support for lots of languages, test frameworks, as well as notification services. They easily integrate with GitHub or Bitbucket and can deploy your code to cloud services like Heroku, AWS, Nodejitsu, Google App Engine, or even your own servers. Setup takes only 3 minutes, and you can get started today with their free plan, and make sure you use the code TheChangelogPodcast to get a 20% discount for 3 months on any plan you choose. Again, that code is TheChangelogPodcast, and you're going to get a 20% discount for 3 months on any plan you choose. Head to codeship.io and tell them the Changelog sent you. So, I have to admit on that front there, because there was at least 2 times, I probably like you, I'm an idea guy. I try and think, and Jeremy, maybe you could back me up on this. I try to think outside the box, and I try to be a dreamer to some degree. And my wife is probably, if she's listening to this, which she's not live, but maybe she listens to it later. I don't know why. But she's probably thinking like, absolutely, he's a dreamer. But there's been several times that I'm like, I want to align what we're doing with the changelog and open source and support and just in general encouragement to the community and the beautiful things that are coming from it. There's been several times I want to chat with you, and I'm like, I don't mind making it open. It's just, it's so early. The idea is so fresh. I'm just not quite, cool with being so open like you are. And I hesitated to reach out because I thought, you'd be like, we can't have that conversation because I have to do it on Google Hangouts.
Oh, this just got real, Adam. This just got real, Stack. This is great because you're right. Yeah, you and we've interacted a bit. I don't remember
you probably remember the email. I'm like, hey, can we talk? And I never responded because I was like, we got to do it open. I'm like, I just couldn't get past it, and I got busy again. So there's that span of time there. So I can appreciate someone extreme like Shanley in her case, where she's getting threats, and obviously there's certain, like you said, negotiated privacy terms you have with the internet for someone like her in her position, and someone even like my position still having reservations. Yeah. And what I want to say is,
dude, I love you, and like, I'm not out to force you to do anything that you're not comfortable doing. Right. And, it seems like where that leaves us is a bit of an opportunity cost on both of our sides.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, and there's some, there's some sadness on my end for that. It's like, well, it would be nice to work together. Right. But I don't know.
We have similar interests, I would say, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So there's a lot of overlap. And so, look, it's a tricky thing all around. Right. Like, and, we've each got our life outside the internet too. Right. Like there's plenty of stuff that you're not finding out about me on the internet. Like I'm bigger than Wit537 and, you're bigger than Adam Stack. Like we've all got these fuller, richer lives. And, part of where I'm coming from is like, I want to privilege that a little bit too. It's like, look, like it's maybe okay if we don't get to pursue this together because we've each, our lives are abundantly rich, right? It's like we've all got plenty of relationships and plenty of things to work on, plenty of projects on the internet and fun stuff to do. And then, families and kids and, and dogs and cats and, just like stuff we love doing, right? And I don't know, life is abundantly rich. And I don't know, I can only feel so bad for so long for losing an opportunity over that because it's, because life is so rich and because it's, I don't know, those are kind of the terms I've negotiated for myself is like, part of it is that it is a limiting factor, right? I think I actually say this, I posted a blog post about my interview policy or a web page. I put it up on my website, right? It's like, here's my interview policy. And in there I say, maybe I'm being narcissistic. Like we all have to manage our time somehow. And this, this turns out to be one way to do it, right? It's like, it's, I don't know, man. If there's a real safety concern or a security concern, of course I'm going to take any phone call and keep it private and confidential, right? So, if you really, if anybody, I don't want anyone to get the impression that's a baseline, right? I'm talking out loud. I'm blabbing.
Don't worry about it. Go ahead.
It's okay. Am I going in the right direction?
Yeah.
There's like, so it has to be, there have to be these tiers to it, right? It's like, so fundamental, foundational, if there's a security concern or a safety concern or a personnel issue in the case of people actually working on Gittip, like a sensitive personnel issue, I'm handling that privately. Like no questions asked. Give me a call, private message me, show up at my house. I mean, I've had, Gittip collaborators show up at my house, right? And like, you don't hear about that on the internet until just now, right? Like, and that's
like in a bad way or in a good way?
Good way.
Like,
good
hey, can
way.
we hack?
Absolutely.
Sure. Okay. Come on in.
Well, yeah. Like, so I don't want to get into too much detail, right? But like, the point is that there is this baseline. I am willing to do private conversations for that kind of stuff, that kind of really sensitive stuff. Then there's this middle ground, which is like the kind of stuff that, you and I are talking about, right? Like, projects that would be fun to do together, your own relationships with privacy on the internet that you negotiate for yourself is different than mine. Like you've got the setting, you've got the dial tuned to a different place than I do. But it's not like you're in danger. It's not like you're like, Chad, somebody's coming after me on Gittip and I need your help, right? So in that case, yeah, man, I'm a little sad about it, but it's an opportunity cost. I'm sorry, man. So like release early, release often.
He's not going to budge. Adam.
I know, right?
I'm not gonna budge, Adam.
He's right there.
But that's the hard thing is like I love you, right? Like I want to work together with you and with everyone else, and this is what I'm bringing to the table. It's like the reason I'm doing it this way, like, I've got my reasons for doing it this way, just like you have your reasons for doing it that way. So I don't know. I guess at the end of the day, there's an agree to disagree.
And I can respect that. That's where I was like, you know what? I don't want to. I could have responded and said, no, you're a jerk. Come on, let's just talk offline.
Right.
But I didn't want to force you because I know what you're trying to do. I know your mission with Gittip, and I know where your heart's at. So I didn't want to question why you were doing it. I figured, we can delay the conversation potentially, and no harm, no foul. I'm not upset with you. I just wanted to point that out that if you've got direct users of Gittip that have an issue with to some degree with, from a security standpoint, like you mentioned. Then you have someone like me who's, maybe from a business standpoint or maybe from just a community standpoint, how can we work together? And I don't want to air out the laundry like right away. I wouldn't mind obviously making everything open. We're about open source, and this show goes on air once a week, and this one in particular is live. So we have no problem with what we say going out to the internet and being documented forever.
Right. Yeah. So one of the things we've discovered is that the real world is kind of a pain in the ass for open companies, because it's like, unless everybody's wearing Google Glass, how are you going to record your meeting that's face to face, right? It's, I don't know. So, but at the same time that scopes it, or there's only so much real life interaction that you can do. And that provides, I don't know, like if you and I run into each other at a conference or something, we end up going out for drinks or, going out and talking, like that's great. That's perfect. Right. I'm not, I don't not go to conferences because they're not broadcast live on the internet, the whole time I'm there. Right.
So your preference is reality TV. And if it's not available, then no problem.
Well, I like the balance, right? I don't, kind of what I've come to is like, I'm not going to be able to make any decisions about stuff, in an offline face-to-face conversation, right? That's part of what it comes down to is like anything that's actually going to move the needle on Gittip, anything that's actually going to be a decision that we make. Like I might have a conversation with you about it privately, but if it's actually going to manifest as something real on the internet on Gittip, then it's going to have to go through the public vetting process in a GitHub issue or whatever. You know what I mean? So it's kind of, I don't know. I see a distinction there between the interpersonal level where it's like I can only interact with so many people in a day because I'm like a bony gut bag that like walks around in meat space, right? And like that puts its own limits on what you can accomplish in gut bag space, and that's appropriate, right? Because phenomenologically, like I am a person, I want to interact with other people, and the internet's this sort of weird ether where you can interact with a billion people very tenuously, and kind of both of those together are part of, or I don't know, or they're both part of the equation for me, And I don't know. This is where it gets more nuanced, right? It's like it's not a simple open companies. Everything has to be open transparency, radical transparency. Like I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. This is where it gets more interesting,
right?
Too,
right. And it's I think we've been on this particular topic for a bit, and it's not in a bad way, but it's so the reason I think it's really important is because it's at the heart of you, and you're at the heart of Gittip, so it's at the heart of your story. Yeah. So anyone who's listening to this knows that you're to some degree radically transparent. You have a open company initiative. You're leading the charge in some way. In some ways, you're in uncharted territories. I mean, in many, many ways, right? This is brand new.
Bushwhacking.
I think you had
absolutely
opencompany.biz, which now redirects to some other domain that is so the ideas evolved to opencompany.org, and I think you've even merged some relationships and whatnot. So
so we launched this open company initiative with balance payments and a couple others, and it's small, and we're just kind of seeing where it goes. But the idea is let's get together companies that are interested in these kind of themes, and and just talk to one another and share experience and whatnot. So it's manifesting as looks like it's going to manifest as an annual event. We did it a couple months ago in San Francisco, and we'll probably do it again next year. It's a pretty light touch there, but yeah.
So it sounds like there's two. You have two kind of tenets of an open company. The second of which you said is charge as little as possible, and I guess that is the one that to me doesn't seem as so much as open in the sense of transparency, right. But maybe it's open in a different way. Can you speak to why that's number two on the list of things an open company should do?
Yeah. So one of the things we've been saying in the open company conversations is transparency is sharing information, and openness is sharing control. Okay. So when I publish, when Buffer publishes their salaries publicly, that's sharing information. That's transparency.
Right.
Right. When I open up my issue tracker, to your feedback, and you can come and create issues on my issue tracker, like Balance does with their dashboard, for example. Right. That's sharing control. That's letting users, yeah, in some ways, this is stuff that's done, with like user voice and get satisfaction, whatever, that kind of stuff too.
Right.
But sharing control. And so for me, the charge as little as possible thing is part of sharing control. Because really, from that initial blog post, like a year and a half ago or 2 years ago or whatever, when I put out the initial blog post, Gittip is an open company. I said it was 3 things: share as much as possible, charge as little as possible, and don't compensate employees. So that's it's evolving, and we haven't, come up with a really clear articulation of how it's evolved. But basically, the idea around money is like, I'm giving the users control over my money too, right? It's like not only can you determine which way the product is going, but you're going to determine
how much money you make from it.
How much it's worth to you. Yeah, exactly. You're going to determine how much it's worth to you.
Because you're making your full living on Gittip, right?
Pretty much, man. Yeah. So that was part of this 2-year window. Is like, all right, is Gittip going to reach the bottom rung of sustainability within 2 years? So my runway's about done. The good news is we do have Ash Dryden, who's up to like $800 a week now, and advertises on her profile that she's 95%, like 95% of her income comes from Gittip. So clear answer, yes, you can make a living on Gittip. No questions asked. Done. Ash is doing it. There's other people that are trying as well. Obviously not as successfully as Ash. I pull $400 or $500 a week from it between what's given to me personally and what I take from the Gittip team, which is almost enough. It's not quite.
I was gonna say you have 4 kids and a wife.
I have 4 kids and a wife and a mortgage. Yeah, so I've been burning down. So I've been living off of Gittip and savings and welfare for the past couple of years, and the savings are about done. And so we still have a week or 2 to figure out.
A week or 2.
What happens next?
Are you being serious with a week or 2, or is that a joke?
Oh no. That's not. Well, I was saying a week or 2 to that 1 year or that June 1st 2-year deadline. But that's definitely a conversation I'm having with my wife right now. Is all right. The one question is, do I still want to work on Gittip? And the answer is yes. Right. Like, I believe in this. I think it's going well. And the second question is, all right, how do we make that work for the next few years? So we're sorting that out. We listed our house on Airbnb, so I've got our first visitors showing up tonight. And so, but then I'm like, all right, but I want to do pay what you want. I don't want to, if I'm gonna get some money from outside of Gittip, I don't want it to, I don't want to charge people anymore for stuff. I just wrote an exposition of our mission statement, which is on the Building Gittip website. There's so many things to catch you guys up on.
So these are topics we want to hit. So don't.
Yeah.
I wanted to pause just for 1 second before we go there, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
2 years ago, when July 12th, 2012, when you first launched Gittip, you wrote a post, "I believe in Gittip," and in there you said, you said lots of stuff, obviously, but one of the key things I pulled out to earmark for the show is just to kind of just put some truth there and some fact. And this is a good time to mention that is your goal at the time was 2,000 a week. You're at just under 500 a week. And we're obviously having this conversation, so everyone's kind of caught up, but that was a goal of yours, and you're kind of, you're 25% there. But
by this time next year, so when did I post this? July 12th, 2012. Yeah, so I didn't hit that. July 12th, 2013. We're coming up on July 2014. Right. So one of the things we've learned is that Gittip is a market for caring. What I mean by that is, I was making whatever at my old job, but I had to do my old job, And so the question is, how much would the internet have to pay you to quit your job and just not do anything? Like, do whatever you wanted, right? Like, is it 50% of what you were making before? Is it 80% of what you were making before? Like, what's the difference between your salary now and what the rest of us would need to pay you to just quit your job and do whatever you wanted, right? Be unfettered. So for me, that's turned out to be a fairly high percentage, like about 80%. I'm making 20% of what I was making at my old job, roughly speaking, and I love it. Like, I wouldn't go back, So that $2,000 figure I put out 2 years ago, that was I was actually still, I think I was still employed. I think I finished up at that job at the end of July. So I was still employed at that old job, and that was driving that number. But then the question has become like, what's it worth to me? What's it worth to me to have that no strings attached? I can wake up in the morning and work on stuff because I want to work on it, and not because I'm chasing a paycheck.
Because there's value in that too. I mean, let's pause there for a second, because you can make an income and be strapped to a job and be not fruitful for your family, not fruitful for the internet or the rest of the world, however you want to pitch that. But there's some extreme flexibility. There's some extreme freedom in the lifestyle you've chosen that is separated from money. And I think, from a first world country standpoint, there's many, many listeners to the Changelog, third world countries, first world countries with many different hardships that I can't even imagine, but I'm in a privileged lifestyle and this is how it is. Right. But they don't always pin back to just money. Our economy in this world, we all interact around money, and that's what we sometimes derive value from, identity from. And you've chosen a different lifestyle that has some freedom in it, that maybe you don't make as much money, which is what the rest of the world thinks is value and what you need to make your lifestyle, but you've chosen a different path.
Yeah, that's true, man. And that's what I mean. That's what it's a market for, right? It's like, that's the question Gittip puts to you, is like, what would we have to pay you? What would the rest of us have to pay you? Would we have to pay you the $200,000 you're making right now at your Silicon Valley, job, or could we pay you $50,000 and you'd be happy and productive, or whatever. Yeah, that's how that's evolved. So I'm no longer expecting $2,000 a week from Gittip.
Well, the reason why I wanted to put out there is because
$2,000 a month at this point.
You're a dreamer, right? And that was probably a goal, but it was a wish. And now we're at some reality, and you're making some serious choices for your family as well as for Gittip. So I just wanted to put that out there to see what your thoughts are on, to reflect back on what your wishes and dreams were originally.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so we're asking those questions right now. We're trying to figure out, it's hard to lower expenses from where we're at right now. So we're trying to figure out how to up the income. So my wife's been working the past couple months, just doing stuff for a friend, nothing long term, but maybe she needs to get a job in the fall when the kids go back to school. Our kids are starting to get older. I mean, this is all the personal stuff that I don't usually talk about on Twitter constantly, but I'm happy to discuss it. Like I said, we're renting out rooms on Airbnb. Okay, so the thing I wanted to say about that is that I have the rooms listed at the Airbnb minimum, and I'm saying pay what you want, right? So like, I'm looking for ways. Another thing that Gittip has gotten into, or has evolved into, is this idea of the pay what you want model, right? Humble Bundle is really good at it. They've kind of proven that it can work. And there's definitely, there's people studying it, right? Like this is a thing. Panera has tried opening a few pay what you want stores, so they're experimenting with it. So I think pay what you want is a real thing that's going to happen. Gittip with individuals is very much patronage, right? So I kind of think of Gittip as being segmented into individuals and then companies, groups, organizations, whatever. Like that's two segments. So for individuals, it's patronage. I love you. I love what you're doing. Take this money and run with it. You don't need to know it's from me. It's anonymous. Go. But then you've got like the Gittip team, or these hacker spaces like Sudo Room that are using it now, or Model View Culture, Shanley's publication. There's these teams, there's these aggregations that are using Gittip, and I don't know. I think we're going to end up seeing that it evolves. It evolves into something a little different than the patronage model is with individuals. Even the Open Company org, the Open Company Initiative. If we want to fund that on Gittip, well, it'd be nice to know who the people are that are giving money to the Open Company Initiative, because then you can call them your members, right? So we might need to relax some of those constraints around, who can see who's giving what to whom. But then also I think we want to find ways to use Gittip to support a pay what you want model. Shields.io, the little README badges. I ended up acquiring. Did we talk? Did this happen last time?
No, but
I acquired the Shields.
Yeah,
project.
you acquired I was wondering, was there? I didn't pay attention to the finer details, but I know that you had some kind of goes back to what you said a little bit earlier in the show, where you kind of had some, maybe some to some degree, private conversations, and then you had an open call about the merge, and I think you even did like a fist bump virtually, right?
Yes. Yeah, Olivier and we met at Waza last year at Heroku's developer conference at the beginning of 2013, and didn't really, I found out that he was working on Shield, but we didn't really have any conversation about it. But then people wanted it for Gittip, people wanted a little Gittip badge to put on their READMEs, and Shields at that point was just some Photoshop files and a design spec. There was nothing dynamic. There was no server implementation, no server API, no web API for it or anything. And Gittip, for our implementation, we needed something dynamic because we don't have just 3 states of badges, pass, fail, build, pass, fail kind of thing. We wanted it to be more complex. We wanted it to be dynamic. So I ended up getting involved in writing an implementation of that, and then finding out, I don't know, it was interesting because it was an exercise in cat herding. What's an easier project? What's an easier weekend project than hacking together an API server for README badges? You know what I mean? It's like, it's something that, any of us could do in an afternoon pretty much. And so a lot of us did. And so we ended up with all these different implementations cropping up. And the genius thing we found to do, and it was Nathan Youngman, I think his name is. Nathan, he's up in Canada, and he's a Go hacker and whatnot. And somehow we had the org badges, the GitHub org named badges. One of the, somebody had grabbed this, and Nathan talked to this fella and agreed to let us use this badges organization. And we just started gathering all of the different repos, So I think we have like 10 or 12 in there now. If you go to GitHub org/badges, let's see what's on there now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, so there's like over a dozen of these repos. A lot of them duplicated effort, But the pattern was we brought somebody in and we didn't take control of their project, because of course the permissions don't change on any of those, right? Like it's just, now it's under the badges repo, badges, org instead of your personal GitHub account. But it's still yours and you're still in charge of it and you're still running it however you want, but it's shown to be part of this bigger effort. And that really was a key step in bringing everybody to the table and then saying, all right, here's the range of possibilities, who actually has the energy to do this, and which way, and what's, now that we've seen what all the possibilities for implementing this are, like what's going to be our way forward. And it's been a success as far as that goes. There's a fella, Espadrine is his GitHub handle, and he's running with it. So he's the day-to-day maintainer. He wrote the current implementation. It's a Node implementation, and he runs and maintains that project. But it had an input from the rest of the community, and kind of, I don't know, it was interesting. I had never had an experience before like that, and I want to hear. I mean, do you have other examples of when that kind of thing has happened? Because I thought it was pretty remarkable, just the way that we brought together lots of different effort and kind of got it funneled in one direction. Like, do you know of other projects that have evolved like that?
None that come to mind for me.
I was just thinking,
me neither.
You guys are the open source. You've got the lay of the land in front of you. I don't know. I thought it was really interesting.
We're keeping up just like everybody else. I mean, there's. I was actually just talking to a listener yesterday, Daniel Lauzon, and he's up from Ottawa, Canada, and he told me about Famous, this JavaScript front end framework that's making interfaces easier. And I'm like, dude, I didn't even know about that. And he's like, oh, I thought you would have known about it because I'm like, we literally are just keeping up just like you. No, we just happen to be a part of making sure everyone's kept up, for lack of better terms.
Yeah, blogging about it all, podcasting.
Let's pause the show for just a minute and give a shout out to our sponsors, TopTal. We've been working with TopTal for quite a while, and I'm thrilled about this relationship. I think they have one of the most coolest, most unique ways to basically connect businesses who need really awesome elite engineers, and also connect really awesome elite engineers to companies who have awesome work to do. So, that's the biggest biggest statement I can even give for them, but we thought it would make sense to take some time to circle back and talk to some of our listeners who have applied to TopTal and have been accepted, because only about 2 to 3% of the engineers who apply actually make it past their strict elite engineering process, because they want the best, simply that. So Daniel Lauzon, a longtime fan and listener of the Changelog, is now living the dream as an elite engineer at TopTal. And I say living the dream because he's now able to have 100% control of the types of projects and technology he's working on, as well as the rate he wants to charge. So Daniel earns 100% of his income as a TopTal engineer, and wanted me to pass on his seal of approval, so to speak, of the TopTal experience. And for those of you out there who are freelancing or would like to test out freelancing or try out a no-risk freelance-like project while you maintain your full-time position to kind of mitigate that risk, you got to check out TopTal, TOPTAL.com. If you think you have what it takes, head to TopTal.com/developers to get started and tell them the Changelog sent you.
Right. So Shields relates to Gittip in that the idea was, let's fund this on Gittip. This is going to take some amount of effort going forward. So let's figure out a pay what you want model, right? So like everybody's got these these GitHub README badges. They're all over the place. Every developer uses them. What if everyone who used one of these chipped 10 cents a week in to the maintenance of the service that's behind it, right? As one user, segment. And then the other is the vendors such as Travis and Coveralls and et cetera, the ones that are actually, providing the badges, the services the badges relate to, maybe they chip in $100 a week or something. You know what I mean? So it's like you've got the companies coming together and giving, you've got the users coming together and giving a lot, a little, and then, we've got this funded. So now Esperdrine is freed up to work on this and make it even better, and maybe we can bring some other people in the mix and make it happen even faster. So that we haven't gotten over the hump on yet. I haven't really put a lot of effort into that just because I've been traveling and doing other stuff, and that hasn't been a priority for me, but it's kind of on the back of my mind, So now that we've kind of settled the technology side of it, like let's figure out the funding side of it. But that, I don't know. So that gets into a couple other things. Let me frame this by saying, and we're at 11:53. How long are we going today?
We're gonna skip the final questions besides the call to arms. So we're gonna skip the normal questions we do, which takes about 15 minutes. So let's say another 12 minutes. Is that cool for you, Jerod?
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Right. So what I've been learning, I think one of the themes is over the past 2 years, I come out of the open source world. I come at this with an open source mindset, and that's a very definite culture, right? Building a company and building a product means integrating and working with people coming from much different cultures, right? So, for example, visual designers, right? Related to open source, related to development, but it's kind of its own thing, So I've been on this effort this year to try and bring design into Gittip, right? To try and breathe with both lungs is how I've been thinking about it, so we can really deliver a world-class product. It's been challenging to interface with designers and to figure out how do designers fit in an open source culture. That's been a challenge, Same thing with journalists, how does this open model relate to journalism? We actually, on the Open Company Initiative, we did an experiment where we tried to bring in journalists. So we had a woman named Bronwyn Clune, who's a columnist for The Guardian, and we were like, all right, let's try this experiment where you're writing content for us, but somehow, it's funded through Gittip. And so, it was this little experiment in open journalism or whatever, right? Didn't really go anywhere. And part of that was, I saw it as kind of a culture clash, right? Like the culture of journalism is not, is not the culture of open source necessarily. That's two. Number three is, Shanley and, everything we were hearing about last night, not necessarily a fit with the open source culture I come from. Perhaps a corrective to it in some ways. And then a fourth one that I'll bring up is investors. This is tying together a few themes here. We started talking very early 2 years ago. Had a conversation with Andy Weissman, who's from Union Square Ventures. We had a long conversation pretty early after Gittip launched. Where do investors fit, right? If Gittip is funded on Gittip, we'd charge as little as possible. We don't compensate our employees. Like, what's the role of the investor in this new, this trail that we're blazing? Didn't have an answer for a couple of years, and then actually, when I heard from Jason, whenever it was last week, I guess maybe was it this week? Last week. It occurred to me that now our Teams feature, which I forget, I don't know, we were maybe just launching it a year ago, but we've got this Teams feature now, which is a whole nother thing, and we'll have to talk about that next year because it's too big for now. But it's awesome. It's actually one of the most important things we're doing on Gittip because it's how we say, it's not just about being a rock star with 20,000 Twitter followers. That's not the only way to make money on Gittip. You can be somebody who just does really good work and is behind the scenes. You can join a team. And the team is pulling the money in on the pay what you want model, right? And then, and you get a part of that. So, because we've got that Teams feature now, we may have a way to, to bring investors into it. But then you're getting, then it's business. I don't know. Then you're talking about marketing again, right? It's like, how do you bring marketing into this? How do you? I mean, that's where we're at with Shield. It's like, so now we need the marketer to come in and say, here's the website we're going to build, and drive that end of it, the business side of it, which just, I don't know. Yeah. So I feel like all of these roles that we're used to, all these roles that we already have some future in this, thing that we're discovering together, right? And I don't know exactly what those look like yet, but we're having a lot of fun finding out as we go along.
You seem to be, every new hurdle you get past or every new, I guess, roadblock, blocker, you find a new one, from all these, it just seems like each new challenge gets, has another challenge right behind it. And I don't want to be discouraging to say this, but I sometimes wonder in myself how much more steam you particularly have left in your engine because you're 80% of the fuel behind Gittip.
Yeah. I have a lot of steam, man. I have tons of steam. What I need is a little more money. If I had, if we can figure out how to get an angel investor in here and, give us a little breathing room. I don't know, maybe like one of our guys working on the team moved to Nicaragua. So he quit his job and moved to Nicaragua so he could lower his burn rate and, work on Gittip full time.
That's commitment right there. That's for sure.
Yeah, right. That's humbling. That's like, so it isn't just Chad anymore.
Yeah.
Like, that's the exciting thing. It's like, we do have people. I'm not the only one working on full time. In fact, we're supposed to have a stand up in a couple minutes here, right? With the team. So it's not, the good news is it's not just Chad. We do have a team. I have people handling support, frontline support, and then they escalate to me if we need to. So the pieces are coming together. It's just, it's chicken and egg, and we're boiling the ocean, and that just takes a little longer than usual,
So let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this.
Sure.
Give me a moment to set this up because it might be kind of just a long setup. But are you familiar with Patreon, which seems to be?
Oh my gosh, I was just about to bring Patreon into this, and I was like, I don't need to do that. But
okay,
let's go there. Let's go there.
Okay, I'm going to go there briefly, just because you're talking about the patronage model, and I just remember there was another website doing patronage, and I've been on their website, kind of comparing, contrasting Patreon and Gittip.
Yeah.
And they seem to have more steam. They have, a few bigger names in the arts, especially in podcasting and kind of online media. Mm-hmm. People making $11,000 a month via the patronage model.
Right.
And I'm trying to think to myself, what's the difference between where you're at? And I don't know their whole backstory. Maybe they're older. I'm guessing
they're not. They're younger.
They have funding.
They have funding. So they're not setting the plows deep. They're not funded on their own platform. They skim off the top. Right. So they're not setting the plows deep. So they're, it's not
making it easier on themselves.
Well, yeah.
Another way to say that?
Yeah, that would be another way to say it. So, their background is, Jack Conti. We did a call, Jack and I, and Len Kendall from SentUp and Linus from Flatter. We did a call, the four of us. It was like 2 weeks after Patreon launched or something, right? So it was maybe it hadn't even launched yet. It was like really early in their cycle, in their life cycle, and I don't know. Right, and ever since then, I've been watching Google Trends. I'll go to Google Trends and look at Gittip and Patreon. It's like, all right, so that's what a hockey stick looks like. It's like, God damn it, right? Yeah. And so I get so burned, man. It's like, why is that not us? And I get really discouraged when I look at it from that point of view, right? I think I mentioned this at the beginning of the call, and this is what I had in mind, right? Like, I get really discouraged when I look at the Google Trend search for Patreon and Gittip, because Patreon is hockey sticked, right? And people are coming to me and being like, hey, do you know about Patreon? Like, my non-tech friends are like, do you know about Patreon? It's like, yes, I know.
Yes, I know.
Right?
Well, I didn't bring it up in order to do that to you.
Well, so look.
But let me ask you this, because the other thing I noticed on their homepage is like featured in TechCrunch, and I started thinking about your situation with TechCrunch.
Yeah.
And then I asked myself,
that game, man. They're playing that game.
Myself
They've got $2 million of capital, right? They took investment. Like they have two founders. The one guy is Jack, who's the front man that everybody sees because he's the YouTube star, right? So he's already plugged into this scene. Like, YouTube stars have fans. Open source programmers don't have fans, So it's like he's already plugged into a scene and tapped into a market and like speaking the language of a culture of, this crew that has fans and has reach beyond what I do, right? So that's what Jack's bringing to the table. And his friend, Sam, I think it is, I don't remember, but his co-founder is the technical co-founder who's a serial co-founder who's, already had, 2 previous companies that he's done. They're in Silicon Valley, they're in San Francisco. They're playing the game straight down the middle. You know what I mean? It's like, and they're, and so featured in TechCrunch and Wired and blah, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Like, and this is what it looks like. So I don't know. So I kick myself because I'm like, I hit this a week or two ago. I was like, do I really believe in Gittip again? Like,
well,
it's
my
coming
question
back.
is more. I'm now hypothesizing that perhaps you would have been in TechCrunch. Maybe you would have had investment if it wasn't for the open strategy. And so my question, like, framing all this is Gittip's success more important, or is your open, radical transparency more important to you, Chad?
Good question.
I mean, I'm just
it's really hard.
That that's what's holding it back. It might not be what's holding it back, but
so to me they're the same, right? Like, Gittip is open company. Like Gittip for me is this idea that I can wake up in the morning and I can live out of a place of gratitude and generosity, and I can give freely of my labor and my resources without asking anything in return, right? And that is not what Patreon is building. And so we're not even competitors when you look at it that way. Like, so in my view, it's like we're not even competitors. Like if Patreon wants to compete with me, then they need to be funded on their own platform, and it needs to be no strings attached gifts. And then I'll just go, work on their platform. Like, I can't work on their platform. They could come work on mine because I'm totally open. I couldn't go work on their platform. Like, it's apples and oranges when I really get down to it. Gotcha. So I don't separate the open company thing from Gittip. Yeah, that's where we're going. I don't know. Yeah, who knows? Maybe a year from now I'll just be. Well, so this is what we need to get. So what would I have done instead of? We'll do these quickly. What would I have done instead of Gittip? What would I be doing if I wasn't doing Gittip?
Yeah.
Oh man, I was so ready to just give up on the internet and go move in with the Amish yesterday, but we worked through that. I would be Amish if I could. That's what I would do. Short answer there. My hero is still Guido Van Rossum, the creator of Python, and Python, I guess, by extension. I got to actually with Kenneth. I texted Kenneth. I hadn't seen him hadn't really sat down with him for a couple conferences, and I said, Kenneth, let's get together for supper. He said, okay, cool. Let me see if that works out with the other folks I'm with. And it ended up being me and Kenneth and Mike and Madi from Ottawa and Guido. The 5 of us went out to dinner together, right? And so
nice.
I ended up like getting to have dinner with Guido, and it was like, hi, I'm Chad, I'm Guido. And so I got to actually meet him after a decade of doing Python stuff, which is pretty special. So he's still my hero. I like that guy. He's doing great. Call to action. Go fund somebody on Patreon. Go, yeah.
No.
Go work for the man, the crowd man.
Crowd man.
I don't know. Yeah. Go go give your labor away, but only in response, only because other people give you money for it. Don't give your stuff away for free. That's not the future. Hold on. Don't share. Oh, am I being bitter? Are we ending on a bitter note?
Yeah, I was gonna say, don't end like that. Give an honest call to arms. I mean,
okay.
Think about it like this: you got a lot of listeners that are thinking, "I want to support Gittip. I don't know how to do it. How can I do it?"
So this is where I'll bring in Building Gittip. We have a new site called building.gittip.com, and that site is new this year, and it's our documentation site for our team, for people working on Gittip, right? So you go there, and it starts with a big picture. It says, here's what our mission is, here's where we're going, and then it zooms in and says, here's the process we use, here's our brand guidelines, here's how we understand our audience and who we're working towards. It answers all those big questions, and then it hopefully gets you plugged in to the issue tracker and understanding how we work, and get you into GitHub and into IRC. So that is the place to start if you want to help us hack on Gittip. And if you want to use Gittip, then use Gittip, gittip.com for support. Here's the question: who inspires you? Who is the one person that you love what they're doing and you want to give them a quarter a week? Go to gittip.com and set that up now, even though that funnel is pretty leaky, but go do it anyway. How about that?
You can also support Gittip directly on there, as well as Wit537, which apparently would also support Gittip directly, I believe.
Yeah. If you like what we're doing, we're there.
Awesome.
But Gittip will work for me because it's working for everybody. So do that.
There were. I want to circle back with you maybe some other way. I feel like when we get to the end of these calls, sometimes we don't get all the things. And there was some stuff with DHH and open source specific to the listeners that are going to be close to their heart. They're thinking like, why didn't you talk about his call with DHH and funding open source? So I think we'll have to.
Dude, I love that. I love when you sit down and talk to somebody for 45 minutes. They're a real person. That
was a cool conversation. Honestly, I love that.
I think it's really powerful. I'd love to see more of that.
I'll tell you what we'll do. If you don't mind, we'll put a post on the changelog with that video in it, and I'd like to just maybe even do something different, break our normal mode of like maybe do another follow-up call. I mean, who says you can't be on here twice in 1 year? It doesn't really matter to me. I just want to have. I think you're doing some pretty cool stuff, and people need to know about it. It's a long story short.
Appreciate it,
really, and I don't want you. I mean, Almost is cool and all, but don't go do that. Keep doing the Gittip thing. And everybody who's listening, go to Gittip right now. Give to teams you love. Give to people you love. Whether they're activists, whether they're open source, it doesn't matter. Figure out who's on there, and if they're not on there, Gittip has a way to bring them on there easily for you. So go and figure out who inspires you and truly give, and maybe even become a receiver yourself. And if you're a company, go on there too and give.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll make it easier. We'll improve the product. It'll be easier for everybody. We'll all do it together.
Well, Chad, I'd love to keep you on the show for as long as we love to kidnap you and just talk to you for years on end, honestly. But, as much as we can be, we want to be an encouragement to you. We want to be encouragement to the contributors of Gittip. Whatever we can to support you in the future now and in the future, let us know. We'll be there for you. We're brothers and sisters in arms, so to speak. So don't feel like you're an island. You're not an island. We're the tree on your island. So.
Awesome.
Before we close, I want to give another shout out to our sponsors. We got Rackspace, CodeShip, and TopTal who support this show. So thank you for their support. And as a matter of fact, all three of those are not only sponsors of the changelog, but they're also partners with the changelog. So that's really neat. They care about our long-term future. So they've put roots in the changelog and they care. So that's super awesome. And if you haven't yet, shoot out a weekly email. It's been a little on a small hiatus, but tune in, because we got some fun stuff coming up. So thechangelog.com/weekly to get updates on fresh and new open source in your email inbox every week. Chad, again, thank you so much for coming and talking to me and Jerod. It's been an absolute pleasure. Listeners, thank you for listening, tuning in live if you're tuning in live. Next week, we're getting better at making sure our schedule is full. So next week we have Felix Geisendorfer coming on the show, talking about robotics, Nodecopter. If you're into drones of any sort, tune into this show. It's going to be a blast. But that's the topic for next week. But until then, let's say goodbye.
Very cool. Thanks for having me on the show, you guys.
Yep. Thanks for coming.
Bye. Bye, everyone.